Well, hello, seventh graders. This is Mr. Hake, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Assyrian battle simulation, also known as attack. Or I guess, if you click on the actual assignment, there's 3 exclamation marks. Maybe I should say that a little bit louder and more excitedly. But we're taking a look at the ancient Assyrians, and they mention them in the textbook in section 4, but I don't think they do a really good job of really explaining who these people were and the impact that they had on this area. I mean, they were severely militaristic. They were very, very militarized. That means they had a very strong military. And they were able to take over most of the civilizations in that area at least one point or another. So let's take a look at the background material on these guys, and then we're going to take a look at a really cool activity here that I think you're going to really enjoy. So let's read through. It says the Assyrian military, the army for the Assyrians was the largest standing army ever seen in the Middle East or the Mediterranean. That means standing army. They were in peacetime or in wartime. Sometimes we hear in standing army means that they're paid to do army work, that the soldiers were, that was their career, basically. That's what they did for a living. So the standing army means that they were ready at any point in time. They had soldiers. Sometimes what you would have seen back then is that, they would have had people that were trained to fight, if needed, but then they had other jobs. They were farmers or they were craftspeople or whatever. And they could, in a pinch, you could have them be in a military, formation of some sort. But these people were actually a standing army. They were trained, hired soldiers. So not only did they have advanced technology, like we talked about in section 2 and 3 of chapter 3, but not only did they have advanced technology, they also had great tactics to capture other kingdoms. That means the tactics are their the methods that they used to fight. The army, for instance, drew rams in to the city walls to break them down. That was one way they got through, these large walls that people would build. The Assyrian troops threw ladders against the walls of the cities and climbed to the city's stronghold while the archers launched arrows. And then, of course, they used these things called sappers. These soldiers who dug tunnels to sap. If you don't know that word as a verb, maybe you know it as like the sap of a tree or something, or a plant. That's a noun. But in this case, it's a verb. It's an actual action. It means to make something weaker. So they would sap the origins of the enemy's walls so they would weaken and fall. So they made the bottoms of the walls collapse, in other words. So knowing that about these people, I want you to use the following pictures of the Assyrian military or any online resources that you research to figure out the best plan of attack for the Assyrian army, as if you are the army. So you're going to move the military forces where you think they should go and then be able to explain why you chose that plan of attack. So just for some reference here, I mean, these are not photographs, of course, but they're based on accounts that we hear from people all over the Middle East about the Assyrians. I mean, they were very, very warlike. You can take a look at some of the pictures and how they did what they did. I mean, the battering rams and these siege towers, they call them, where if you've seen like Lord of the Rings or anything, you've probably seen things like this. When you have to get over a wall, well, you build something as high as the wall, and you bring it in flat, or you roll it in, straight up. It could be, vertical as well, and then pull it up so that they can actually get off of here into the city walls. So even walls didn't stop them. And then, take a look at the almost like army ants, going through here, which is something that, metaphor that we like to use for these troops. If they wanted to take over your city, they're going to take over your city. You can see once they're in, they were pretty brutal as well. So we see, again, the kind of the army ant, almost looks like army ants over here, in my opinion, in this particular picture. But they're going to get in eventually somehow. And the siege towers you see and the archers you can see, they had very specific types of troops. So the first battle, this is an actual battle that they had, was Lachesh, is what it's called. And the Assyrians versus Lachesh, a little bit of a background on it, because, I'll give you the maps, but here's what actually happened. It was one of several hilltop city or forts that guarded the canyons that lead up to Jerusalem and greater Judea. So they wanted to attack Jerusalem. Jerusalem's right down here. They had to go through Lachesh. They started off in Nineveh. That's their capital. And then they had to travel all the way over here along the coast as well to get to Lachesh. and then Lachish would lead them into Jerusalem, as we see in the next battle. That's the second battle. That's really where they wanted to go, was, Jerusalem. So to get to Jerusalem over here, they have to get through Lachish. So that's the first battle. So this was a kind of a guardian city. It was a fort, as well as a city where it guarded the canyons that lead up to Jerusalem and greater Judea. The easiest way to get a large attacking army up to Jerusalem was to approach from the coast. In order to lay siege to Jerusalem, an invading army would first have to take Lachish, which guarded the mountain pass. And just, so we know these terms, laying siege to some city means that you're sitting outside basically waiting for them to give up. That you don't let any resources in, no people come out. You just sit there outside the city walls and just kind of sit around and make sure nobody gets out. And eventually, a lot of times that actually works, where they don't have enough food or they don't have water, medicine, or whatever happens, that they end up just saying, fine, we give up. But that's laying siege to something, to a city. But during the reign of Hezekiah, the king of Judah, the Assyrians under King Sennacherib attempted to take Jerusalem. While Jerusalem stood firm against the onslaught, Lachish fell to the brutal Assyrian soldiers in 701 BCE. How do we know what happened, though? And it's always what a lot of students like to know. I mean, how do we know that even happened? Well, the events surrounding the conquest of Lachish are documented in lots of different sources, which was pretty unusual for that time period. Remember, not a lot of people could read and write, so to write down this battle in all these different sources must have been a significant battle. But besides being described in the Christian Bible as well, we find evidence of the Battle of Lachish in some extraordinary artifacts unearthed by archaeologists. In 1849, this British archaeologist, Austin Henry Layard, found the remains of the Assyrian temple and lost palace of the lost palace of King Sennacherib, with its 71 rooms and enormous carved reliefs showing the battles won by the Assyrians, including details of the conquest of Lachish. So, we have to be careful, of course, because they were the ones that made these stone carvings. And, were they exaggerating? Possibly. People tend to do that with things that they do and they're proud of. When they win something, they tend to exaggerate their role in it. But, we have evidence that this happened from several different places, from literature and from archaeology itself, where they dig stuff out of the ground. So in the book, The Art of Warfare in Biblical Lands, the renowned Israeli archaeologist, I'm going to say Yigal Yadin, I'm sure I'm messing it up, noted that because the conquering Assyrian kings decorated their palaces with hundreds of thousands of wall carvings and paintings detailing their battles, archaeologists and historians have been able to interpret these artifacts to learn warfare in this time period. So we've been able to look back and say, oh, this is how they fought, right? No, that's what you're going to be doing now. So knowing that you have to get through Lachish to get to Jerusalem, here's Lachish. Notice this is two different maps, but they're the same city. See this kind of lead up, this hill leading up to the city, the pathway here, looks like pretty much the only way in, right? It's the same one here. This is the same pathway. It's just a different angle. Hope that makes sense. Like if you took this and twisted it slightly to be this direction, take this and just twist the whole map, clockwise basically, you'll have this map. So whatever map floats your boat, you need to use as background. Now look on the outside edges, because what you're going to be doing is moving the military forces where you think they should go, and then be able to explain why you chose that plan of attack. So for instance, like if I want to bring the battering ram up, because I got to get into the city, right? So I'm going to have a battering ram. I drag the battering ram onto there. Each one of these is a different, picture. In this case, each one is one battering ram. So you have 3 battering rams total for this entire battle. So keep those in mind. Here you have, each one of these is 10 charioteers, for instance. So, this one is 10 men digging. This is 1 ladder team. And then you have some others on the other side that are various amounts of people too. So each picture represents that many people doing those things. Okay? So getting back to our original, theory here, the original strategy, if I'm going to bring my battering ram up here, I probably should be able to protect it, because the people along this wall are not going in here. There's 2. If you look closely at the other one here, you see there's a courtyard into there. There's a gate here and there's a gate there. So there's actually way for them to have soldiers out on this wall here and all along this wall here, so they can protect whatever's, protect themselves, I should say, from whatever's coming up this ramp. So if I'm going to bring a battering ram up, it's got to be protected. So who am I going to bring in to protect the battering ram? Well, maybe I bring in some of the archers, for instance. So each of these is 100 archers. So I'm going to bring in some archers along with them. Okay, and this is going to be the first step. So I'm bringing the archers to kind of guard this battering ram. So I'm going to grab this step right here and see if there's these numbers over on the side. I put them here to make it easy for you, and some arrows too if you need. And so you can pull this on. This is going to be step 1. I'm going to bring the battering ram up, and I'm going to protect it with archers. So then I go over to my thing here, my description, and say I chose to move the battering ram, first, because I need to get through the gate. And then I chose to move the archers because they are guarding the ram. Okay, so that's step 1. So, I don't know why that's doing that. Just stretch that down. Goofball thing. Anyways, I fixed that for you. Hopefully it doesn't do it when you're going through yours. So each step I take, I'm going to go through and describe that. So once I get into the walls, let's say the battering ram is successful, then what do I want to do? Well, maybe I'm going to bring up some horseback archers and maybe some chariots to go into the city. So I'm going to, make sure that step 2 is detailed here, that once I'm ready to go into the city, who am I going to bring in with me? Well, I'm going to bring all my charioteers. I'm going to bring, 2 of the loads of them, so there's 20 there. I'm going to bring in some horseback archers, and we need some people to protect them. So the spearmen over here represents 200 spearmen. You have 1,200 total. So I'm going to bring in some spearmen to protect them as well. Now notice this is starting to get a little crowded, right? And if I continued on all these steps, I might run out of space. That's why I gave you this other map too. You can put the steps 1 through whatever on here, 1 through 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you want to put the rest of the steps on slide 10, that would be fine, for instance. So it's the same map. It's just, like I said, slightly tilted. That's all. So you're moving these guys onto the map to show where you would attack the city. That's the big idea. And then make sure you say what you're doing each time here so that I know that you understand why you're moving them on there. Otherwise, anybody with a mouse could move this onto a screen here from over here to over here. But why are you doing it? That's the important part. So then we have battle 2. Okay, once you finish up with battle 1 in the description, then you have Jerusalem. So again, you think of the thousands of miles they're traveling to get to these places and back. This is a long distance. So they went from Nineveh, their capital, to Jerusalem, and they went through Lachish. Now, the Jerusalem, the army of Jerusalem, put up a different sort of fight here. We're going to take a look at that in just a second. So Jerusalem was a little bit different. This battle had to be different because they had some defenses that some of the other cities didn't have. Number 1, the ancient city of Jerusalem, it says, being on a mountain, is naturally defensible from almost all sides. I don't know if you ever played King of the Mountain or not, but the person on top has an advantage. And, they can throw the others off fairly easily. Well, if they're up on a hill, which is what Jerusalem is, they're up on the top of a mountain, they can defend all sides of their city because it's very hard for people to climb up the side here and make their way up here. They can have people at top that are just firing arrows at them or throwing rocks or whatever they need to do. So it's naturally defensible from almost all sides, like it says, because it's up on the mountain. But it suffers from the major drawback that its major source of water, which is called the Gihon Spring, is on the side of a cliff overlooking this valley. So the major military weakness, this presents, a major military weakness as the city walls, if high enough to be defensible, right, you can defend yourself with these walls, must necessarily leave the Gihon Spring outside, which leaves the city without a fresh water supply in the case of a siege. So if there were people outside the city just sitting out here, like we said before, they're laying siege to it and waiting for Jerusalem to give up, If the water is available to Jerusalem, they have fresh water. And if they stock enough food, they can last for months, if not, longer. So they have some time to burn. If somebody's outside, they can just sit there too. They're going to sit outside the city walls here and keep people from going in and out. Well, fine. We have food. We have water. But the water source, if you take a look at it, was outside the city wall. So it was overlooking this cliff that they had. And so they had to figure this out. So what they ended up doing is it says Hezekiah in 701 BC, king of Judah, Hezekiah, ordered his engineers to guarantee a steady supply of drinking water to the western quarters of his capital city, which was Jerusalem. 2 crews, one starting from the east and the second one starting from the west, chiseled a tunnel under the city which diverted water from the Gihon spring into a pool later called the Pool of Siloam. So you can see that happened here. They built this as the Pool of Siloam here, and you can see the key here. It says number 3 is the Pool of Siloam. So the Gihon spring is all the way over here. That wasn't a good place for it to be. So they took the Gihon spring and they diverted the water through the tunnel that they built over to the Pool of Siloam, which is inside the walls if you take a look. So this is a runoff pool that they had down here, just FYI, in case there was too much water in the pool. But they had enough fresh water now. They didn't have to worry about the military taking over the Gihon spring, the opposing military. That being said, what happened at Jerusalem ultimately with this battle is debated, because Hezekiah, the king of Judah, the one that was in charge of Jerusalem, reports that the Assyrians left after being hit with a major disease outbreak. The Assyrians say that they attacked Jerusalem in their records, but they don't really say that they actually won. They don't actually say that. So you would think if they won, they'd be bragging about it and all manner of, proud. But in this case, we find that they weren't bragging about it necessarily. They say we attacked them, and they kind of trail off after that and not really say why. So we think that Jerusalem was able to hold out. So your task is to attack Jerusalem and see if you can change history, so to speak. So you have your troops again. How can you attack this city? You only have 4 siege ladder teams. You only have 4 teams of sappers, people that can dig under the walls. And then you have 3 battering rams. So you got to get into the city. Looking at the map here, you have to get into the city, number 1. And once you're in the city, then you can start figuring out which troops can I have in there to battle through. And then, remember, even though I get one through one wall here, there's another one, and another one, and another one. So there's all these different walls in place. You just have to keep that in mind as you're attacking. I can't put all my battering rams on one wall, for instance. That wouldn't work. I have multiple walls to batter down, sap, or use the ladder teams. Okay, so if there's any questions, I'm sorry, one last piece. Make sure you put this down here the same way we did before. But then the last final thought is this. As you kind of wrap all of this up, they were called by many people a military machine. The Assyrian military the Assyrian army. Why do you think that they were called that? They were very effective. Why do you think they were so effective? Think about it in a metaphorical sense. It's a metaphor. It stands for something else, right? It's like something else. So in this metaphor, we're talking about a machine. How do machines work? All the parts of machines, how do they run? Start thinking in that direction. And how is that similar to what we saw with the military here and all the different types of personnel that you might find in the Assyrian military? Okay, so that's the final note. Make sure if you have any questions, let me know. Hopefully that was a quick roundup, like I said, and I think you're having a fun time with this. It's kind of like those apps that you see nowadays, the war apps where you have to move troops around into different places. Also kind of like a board game as well. So I'm hoping you have a fun time with it. Let me know if any questions. Take care.